Hello and welcome to the Savage Movie Night Podcast. We are back continuing to talk all about the 1996 horror classic Scream. I'm your heartwarming school drama based on a true story brought to you by the master of horror host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is my Dancing in the Dark with Bruce Springsteen co-host, Kristen. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Adam. How's it going?
Good. It's your favorite time of year, spooky season. What treats do you like making during spooky season?
Well, it's kind of, I find a lot of them through Pinterest. I try out different ones every year, but some of my favorites, I love to make these cake balls made from like a funfetti mix and use like white chocolate, sprinkles and everything. Those are super good. I make some like candy corn cookies. I've made it's not candy corn flavored, but it's like a cake where you like do the different colors of the candy corn, and that one's really good. And you put candy corn on top. I am a candy corn fan. I know a lot of people are haters of candy corn, but I like candy corn, that's a good one.
I like candy corn too, and honestly, with each dish you're describing, I'm like, as your boss, can I technically force you to give me samples?
Right? Oh my gosh. Yeah, those cake balls, they are addictive. Like I will make like a separate batch for like a party I'm having and then just like a batch for Greg and I, because I'm like, I don't want to share. Like I want to have some on hand for us because they're so good.
Well, it's like when Colleen talks about cooking, like baking stuff, like she's far enough away, that I can't, realistically dream of trying some. But you are, we're in the same geographic area, so I could, be like, okay, no, you have to make some samples for me and meet up. Like that.
You're using the gas money. You're the boss.
Yeah. So
I'll think about it, Adam.
Yeah.
You do if you make the drive, because I'm not making it.
Well, awesome. Well, and of course, our show wouldn't be complete without our man who we can't trust, because you can never trust somebody from Hollywood, co-host Rob.
What's happening, Adam? Kristen.
Hey, man.
I really need to send you the clip of that to see the delivery of that line.
I thought you were just very passionate about how much you can't trust me. So,
oh no, that's a deep cut for my professional wrestling fans out there, and especially fans of OSW Review, because they like to reference that line a lot. Way back in the Warriors episode, you shared one of your old Halloween costumes from when you were growing up. What are some of your favorite or least favorite costumes over the years?
Over the years, you know what? I don't even dress up enough anymore, right? And get into it. I really should. Yeah. But I think the other one that stands out for me being Ace Frehley, that was a good year. My cousin was what was the drummer's name? I forget, but being members of Kiss, that was a whole lot of fun. But and since then, the other highlight is being the Stay Puft Marshmallow and taking the kids out. That was a lot of fun.
Were the kids Ghostbusters and you were the marshmallow?
Yeah, they were.
That's cute. I love that.
Yeah. For me, a classic one, probably has to be my mom when I was like 8 years old. This is 1991. So MC Hammer was huge. I'd just seen him in concert, my first ever concert. His cartoon show had just debuted. And so my mom made me an MC Hammer concert, which was just like a vest and poofy pants. And, so I think a lot of people just figured I was a genie, and I had to tell them, no, I'm MC Hammer.
If I were to pick one for me, I think Greg and I, my husband, we peaked one year. We came up with the greatest idea. So we decided we would be Taco Bell. And so I was Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and Greg was a taco.
That's
and
really
it was like
good.
The perfect pun. That was our peak. We will never come up with a better costume than that. We've never found a good one as good of one. That was our best.
Well, that was my childhood, favorite, especially because like I wore those poofy pants for years afterward. They were super comfortable, and like great pajama pants. And then as an adult, like just a few years ago, I did Macho Man Randy Savage. It was just one of those off the store from the store costumes, being able to dress up like the Macho Man, yeah. Especially with my last name already being Savage, was kind of fun. So yeah, no.
Did anyone dress up as Ghostface between us? Anyone within the Scream franchise? I did not.
No, I did not.
My kid did one year, definitely. But I think that the Instagram that we have for Saturday Night Movie Podcast, we're going to have to put up some of these photos of you, Adam, especially the one with the poofy pants.
I don't think I have any photos, man.
We'll find one.
No, like I have all the family's old photos in my house, and I know I haven't seen one, man.
It's time for me to go to the AI machine. We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
But speaking of ghosts,
today on this part of the episode, we are going to learn who really killed the Fonz, how two giggling morons nearly derailed a franchise, and most importantly, why Scooby and the gang are here. Because we are continuing to talk all about Scream. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by Jazzology with Willard Jenkins. Jazzology is a fun and challenging jazz trivia show where two contestants go head-to-head for the chance to win $100 and prove their jazz knowledge. Watch along and see if you know the answers. Want to prove you are a true jazzologist by appearing as a contestant on the show? Use the link in the description of any episode to sign up. New episodes air every other Friday on Savage Content YouTube channel, youtube.com/Savage Content, and all past episodes are available under the Live tab. Thanks to Jazzology for sponsoring today's episode, and now, back to the show.
Just a warning to anyone listening, we are going to talk about Harvey Weinstein by name and some of the accusations against him, specifically the ones brought on by Rose McGowan. We're not going to go into too much detail, but if those are something, just be warned if that's something you prefer not to listen to. So thanks so much, and now on with the rest of the show. This is part 2 of our discussion of the classic meta-slasher Scream. In case you haven't listened to part 1 and you are instead starting with part 2, I still insist that is weird and ask you to pause, go listen to part 1, and come right back here. But our analytics say more people listen to part 2 than part 1 for some reason. So here's a recap of what happened so far. Casey Becker is a high school student, home alone, making popcorn, waiting for her boyfriend to arrive. She gets a call on her home phone that turns from strange and fun to dark and terrifying. It gets even worse when the caller is actually outside her house and her boyfriend is tied up. Soon, her boyfriend is brutally murdered and she is on the run, trying to escape the same fate, only to fall and become a victim herself just when her parents come home. We then meet Sydney Prescott, who lives with her father. Their family is approaching the 1-year anniversary of Sydney's mother's murder. She receives a surprise late-night visit from her boyfriend, Billy Loomis, where they discuss their relationship and her reluctance to go all the way with him. And that is where we left off. So, let's get back into the plot. Take it away, Kristen.
All right. So, yeah, we've got a lot of background about Sydney and Billy. We get a little bit of hint of what's to come. So in the plot, it's the next day in the movie, and the town is in a total media frenzy as a police investigation begins into Casey and Steve's murders. There's really little to go on. So they start by interviewing everybody at the school. And that's where we kind of meet other important characters in Sydney's group of friends, including her best friend, Tatum Riley, Tatum's boyfriend, Stu Macher, and film nut Randy Meeks. And there's this part where they're out on the courtyard, they're eating lunch, and they discuss the situation and kind of what they were all doing the night before. They're having very meta conversations about the murder and who could be the murderer, that sort of thing. And then later after this scene, we see Sydney back home. She's gathering clothes to kind of stay over at Tatum's house before settling down for a nap. And remember, her dad is off on a business trip, so she doesn't really want to be home alone. So that's why she's going over to stay at her friend's house. And also just that's what you do as a teen. So yeah, as she's waiting for Tatum to pick her up later than that evening, she wakes up from the nap and receives a call from Ghostface, who tries to spook her. But Sydney is not buying his threats at first. She thinks it's her friend Randy messing around. And then she realizes that this caller is serious when he starts taunting her about her mother's death. And that's when she calls him a cretin and hangs up the phone. But then Ghostface jumps out of a closet and attacks her. A chase ensues. She hides away in her bedroom, tries to call 911 on her computer, but then Ghostface disappears just before Billy, her boyfriend, comes through the bedroom window. She's relieved to see him at first, but becomes suspicious when a cell phone falls out of his pocket.
Yes, very suspicious. Yeah,
Very suspicious.
You mentioned Tatum's boyfriend being Stu Macher, and I gotta shout him out because like he is like the pure energy guy. You don't know sort of what to think of this character other than he is 100% just pure energy. His name is Matthew Lillard, excuse me, and he's best known for this role. And also, though, as Shaggy Rogers in the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. He actually originally tried out for the role of Billy Loomis, the character Billy Loomis. Didn't get it, obviously. I don't think they didn't really envision him making out with Neve Campbell very much. That kind of makes sense. His early work, his early films included Serial Mom, Hackers,
SLC Punk. Yeah, no, that's a great movie. You can imagine my interest in music.
Is it a docu?
No, it's not I mean, it's a period piece. Even at the time, it takes, it was made in the late '90s. I remember it. Takes place in the '80s, like mid '80s.
Okay.
In Salt Lake City, hence the SLC. A group of punks living in that area. In their early 20s. The characters are supposed to be in their early 20s. Navigating young adulthood. It's actually got a pretty young Jason Segel, who, before I even knew who that was, around his time when he was on Freaks and Geeks.
Okay. Well, he was also in the movie 13 Ghosts. And then later on in his career, I've seen him in The Descendants, Trouble with the Curve, Twin Peaks, The Return, and most recently Five Nights at Freddy's, which I didn't see, but I'm definitely familiar with the video game. And otherwise, I already mentioned him being, the part of the live action of Scooby-Doo movies. He's also the animated voice of Shaggy ever since Casey Kasem retired from the role in 2009.
Yeah,
Casey Kasem,
I love
passed
Matthew
away.
Lillard.
Yeah, he's been. I think he passed away a while ago. Yeah. But I mean, even before he passed, he retired from the role.
Right.
Yeah, I love Matthew Lillard. I think he's so cool. I got, not formally meet, but I attended a panel that he was at a horror convention, that like a Q&A type thing, and he was very close to me. I fangirled a lot. It was very cool. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because even before Scream, like I loved him as Shaggy in the live action Scooby-Doo. I love the Scooby-Doo live action movies. They're like my childhood. That's another one that we could easily pick because the soundtrack for that movie is just phenomenal. But yeah, I finally just got to see him do his animated Shaggy too, because I watched Return to Zombie Island this past weekend. Because it's kind of like a sequel, very meta about the original Zombie Island, but that was one of the ones I actually got to hear Matthew Lillard be Shaggy instead of Casey Kasem, because a lot of the ones I saw, I think, were the older ones.
Yeah, Matthew as Schumacher, when you're watching this film, at least for me, my impression, like he was the most untrustworthy guy as I'm trying to figure out who the killer is and all this. He's definitely like on the top of my list because he's so rambunctious and you just feel like, is he the guy? So
yeah, well,
he's so suspicious.
That I first saw him in Hackers about a year or around this time, maybe like a year or so before. And then and I loved him in that. And then by this, he was, one of my favorites, especially being a teenager. That energy he gives out in both those performances is, very teenager friendly. And, I saw some stuff, doing research for this, like 25th anniversary retrospectives and stuff from a few years ago, where he's talking about like, he watches it and he just wants to tell himself, turn it down because he is chewing the scenery. But I mean, it works. And like, I don't know if it would work as well if he was less than 1,000% Matthew Lillard in this role, that he is just so great. And I mean like that, but also that also gets into like the dialogue, like when they're sitting around talking, or like later on in the video store, the dialogue there, that is just peak 90s movie dialogue, the kind of, Tarantino, Kevin Smith, Clerks, this, what they call Buffy speak from the Buffy TV shows, that kind of talking is what the whole dialogue, all the dialogue between the characters are. It's not realistic in many ways, but at the same time, it's also it was very fresh and new at the time. To hear characters.
And while we're talking about like dialogue, I think that there's something like about with some of it that there's like these little callbacks that you notice each time you watch the film too, like how there was like that joke with Randy talking about like, oh, did she put her liver in the mailbox? I thought there was some liver in the mailbox or whatever. And then Sydney comes home that day and she is like, going to check her mailbox, but she like pauses just for like a slight second because she was remembering the liver in the mailbox comment and is scared to see one in there. Oh man. Yeah, I really love those like little details like that.
And I go and mention Tatum's boyfriend. I'm skipping over the fact that like I feel like Rose McGowan is so established. I just kind of went past that. Tatum Ryland is played by Rose McGowan, and Rose McGowan. Many of us probably maybe first have seen her in Encino Man and later on the dark comedy on the Doom Generation. But it wasn't that long. I think it was just a year later actually. She was in Scream. And then she's went on to other films like Devil in the Flesh, Jawbreaker, Grindhouse, and the TV show Charmed, of course, which, was a juggernaut in itself. We all know her as being an activist. I think that's kind of, well known at this point. She was Time Magazine's Person of the Year 2017. And she was definitely recognized as one of the silence breakers for speaking out against sexual assault and harassment, specifically in regards to the whole Harvey Weinstein sexual abuse case that that Adam, you mentioned in episode 1, and the whole, Me Too movement. Since that kind of era, she went on to release a memoir, Brave, and she starred in a 4-part documentary series, Citizen Rose. I think that was around 2018. But yeah, no, I mean, Rose McGowan, she's a symbol of that era for sure.
Yeah, well, and like Rob, you and I probably also really remember, because this was her breakout role, she dated Marilyn Manson for a while, another really quality human being. That if you remember, she attended it was either MTV Movie Awards or MTV Music Awards, one of the two, around this time with that dress. And if you Google that, you'll see what we're talking about. It was a very revealing dress. So that was another thing she was very much known for. But then, even before, Me Too and all that stuff, she had been very vocal about speaking out against harassment and Harvey Weinstein in particular. And that, we can't go without talking about it because, Harvey Weinstein is the head of Miramax, is the co-head of Miramax. He is instrumental in this project. For the most part, anytime we're talking about like studio executives wanted this change or said to do this or made this decision, we're really talking about Harvey. And that's just, inescapable. And this is also, when, her dealings with Harvey Weinstein first came about. But Jawbreaker there are a lot of people from my generation, Gen X, who really like it, even though it underperformed. I remember, I've never seen it. I know it was big, like it being around in the zeitgeist and seeing, ads and posters for it and seeing it in movie stores. And then of course, Grindhouse and Charmed were big deals. Something I mentioned to you guys when we were doing the notes, she was also raised in a religious group that some people not necessarily myself, but some people would call a cult. It is the same religious group that Joaquin and River Phoenix were raised in.
She's definitely got an interesting history and all of that, and I think she really brings a lot of energy to this role. I really like her as the best friend, even though it's like some of her lines, like we've talked about some of the lines, they're like a little cringe, but that's kind of just the vibe of this whole movie. Some of the things that she says, I'm like, come on, I'm like you're supposed to be her friend.
Well, it's also, to quote Grandpa Simpson from The Simpsons, as was the style at the time. Like this dialogue is very much of its time. Especially like there are homophobic slurs tossed out amongst the group at times, if I remember correctly. And keep in mind, Kevin Williamson is an out gay man, that he is really just perfect, as much as we talk about like, well, the dialogue's not super realistic. There are elements that make it feel like, even if it's not, that's not truly how people talk, that's how people talk. And that's why this dialogue style became so popular,
Yeah, and I mean, it does work, even if it is, like, it does take you a second to get used to. It's still a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. No, I still, have a great fondness for it. And I think everybody in this cast does such a great job. Rose McGowan, I definitely had a bit of a crush on her after this movie. And just jumping back a bit to Matthew Lillard, it's funny he mentioned that people, you're not the right guy to make out with Neve Campbell the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess who's dated for a while after this movie? Matthew Lillard and Neve Campbell.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But you know what? I definitely agree. He would not have been the right fit for the kind of
nobody would
role.
believe it. Like what you just said right now to me. Like that's crazy. Like you can't picture them together.
Yeah. But actors and characters are two very different things. Of course, that kind of thing is also. But yeah, I mean, clearly they had some kind of chemistry to date at some point.
Yeah, but the actors were so good. Rose McGowan was so good. I love her in this role. And then as we kind of wrap up talking about the actors, there are a couple things in the plot I didn't want to jump back to before we got too far away with them. So one of them is, again, a couple of it is there's some very 90s things in the plot. One, just Sydney, a teenager, not really specified exactly how old she is, but doesn't seem that the plot doesn't seem to indicate like she's a senior, so, like probably like 15, 16 in the plot. And yet the idea that she could be home alone while her parent is out of town, with no, adult supervision, and only going to the friend's house, because all this stuff is, riling up the town and adding bad memories, is a very 90s thing. Like, I think a parent would get in trouble if they left their 15 or 16-year-old home alone for, like a weekend or whatever.
Really? I don't know about that. I mean, it's a teenager by that point.
Yeah,
like, if we're talking like 13, I think we're being a little dramatic here. Like, this is a teenager. She's fine. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's a 90s thing, but that just be how I am interpreting things. But I mean, maybe if she was a problem child that would throw a party, then you don't leave your teenager alone for the weekend. But like,
I don't know. I guess I'm not a parent, so maybe it's hard for me to judge, where we are with letting kids do things anymore. Not like, I'm not trying to say that in a negative way towards today's parenting style. It's just like, I literally have no gauge in like, so, just based on what I've seen with other, parenting of other ages, I wasn't sure if, to me, I figured that probably wasn't good anymore. So I'm not speaking from
understand.
experience on
I think that, this is around the age where you do let this happen for the first time, where like, so, but I hear you out.
Yeah. Well, and then, the very 90s thing of how she tries to call 911 on her computer, and that was very cutting edge, like, almost like, science fiction, because most people wouldn't be able to do that. And then cell phones become a big part of this movie, and that was deliberate, taking advantage of a relatively new technology that was just starting to become widely available to the general public. It wasn't even like at this, it was it was still pretty unusual for people to have cell phones, that they'd been around for a while, but it was around this time that you started to become more common. And then in the 2000s was when just about you started to be like, what do you mean you don't even have like one of those like Nokia phones that are, the rectangular.
And Adam's referencing actual, like, just the ability to make calls and receive calls, not a smartphone. That didn't happen
just like
later.
a base level make calls, maybe.
Yeah.
Text. But yeah. So we were talking a bit with the age thing about the kind of person that Sydney is, and I really wanted to just like take a moment to kind of go through a bit more of the scene, and just like this really establishes also just more of her personality, because she's not easily spooked, and we kind of have this moment of her just being like a badass and trying to fight back, like as this person on the phone's trying to scare her and freak her out. It takes a bit for her to finally like be like, oh crap, this is real. And I really like that about her. And just like, and once again, the level of detail and the meta nature of the script, because just like a couple minutes after Sydney is telling this guy on the phone, like, oh yeah, like stupid horror movies where the women will like run up the steps instead of going out the front door. And then she has a moment where she can't exit out the front door and has to run up the stairs. It's her only method of escape. And I really like how it takes those moments and then like, it's once again, just playing with the horror genre, playing with the conventions, and doing it in such a way that's just like really fun, and it puts her in a scenario that it would only make sense for her to go upstairs. Really love that. Yeah, and I mean, Roger L. Jackson, we have to talk about him as well, because so people who may not know this, like, so the voice of Ghostface is not the actual person who the killer ends up being at the end of the film. We're not going to reveal it yet in case for some reason you haven't seen this film and you're just wanting to find out. But yeah, so Roger L. Jackson, he has done the Ghostface voice, not only for this movie, but every movie in the franchise, even the ones in 2022 and 2023. So it's really impressive, the level that he's able to like establish. And now he has such a voice that people are like, it's this guy is Ghostface or nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting because one, like I initially thought it was the killer because the actor who is the killer, because there are nuances related to his performance, related to the performance that are unique, that I thought came from that actor. So I was a little surprised to learn that it was someone else. But the other thing they did was especially for like Drew Barrymore's scene that you've heard us talk about in part one, he was on set giving those lines, but Drew could never see him. And I think that's the case with all the people, is he would be on set, but he would be hidden away so they could hear him, they could react, they could bounce off each other and perform together, but they couldn't see him. So he was, to give that, slight sense of realism to it. But he does a great job. And, Rob, you were just mentioning to us some other cool roles he had outside of this.
I'm forgetting the character's name right now. It was one of the Powerpuff Girls that he also voices.
Well, not one of the girls.
Villain.
Yeah. Mojo Jojo, I think.
Mojo.
That's it.
Yeah.
Love
yes.
It. Yeah, man. I Powerpuff Girls, love it. And yeah, it's very impressive. You see him around on the horror convention circuits a lot. You can go and meet him and stuff like that, which is really cool.
Well, so one last bit of trivia as we're kind of wrapping up this little bit here, because we've gone a little long here.
Lots to discuss in this area.
No, but when Ghostface is outside at the door, looking in at Sydney, and he's got the knife, he's going to try and stab inside and stuff. That is one of the few times it's not played by a stunt person. A lot of times it's just a stunt person under the costume running around. There are a couple times it's the actual actor who is the killer. but this time it's not the actor who's the killer. It's not the stunt person. It's Wes Craven
himself.
Nice. He got
Nice.
to put on the costume. Very cool. Yeah, and
Yeah.
before we move on, I just also have to do a very, very quick shout out to Marco Beltrami's score, because I mean the score throughout this entire film is just so well done, setting the tone, setting the score, especially in this chase scene. It really ramps up at the right moments, and in the moments before those, like, it just kind of has this like calm bit to it. And then when we're kind of seeing moments in the town, there's like this operatic kind of singing in the background. Just every thing that he chooses is very interesting and cool. And actually, I'm working on a blog right now, kind of diving into more of the background of how he got this job. But it's very interesting. I really like what he did with the score. And he went on. This was kind of like his big break, and he went on and did a whole lot more of them. Like beyond Scream, he's also done a whole lot of horror movies, but also most recently like Free Solo and some other like good ones like that. But yeah, very, very impressive with the score here, especially because a lot of it is not doing like the typical kind of orchestral kind of things. It adds like a little more extra sound effects, and I don't know. I could go on and on about it, but that's basically, I just wanted to say it's cool and it's great.
I don't mean this as a knock. It's not a negative, but there are many moments you're not even catching on to the score, and that's actually a compliment. What I mean by that is the score is keeping you involved with the story and guiding you. Like it's so a part of it that you're not really noticing how well it is doing its job. So
yeah, no, it's the same with as good and effective as the needle drops are, as the soundtrack music is used. There's a lot of times, like outside of one or two songs, I didn't even really notice it. Just because
go back and watch the opening scene, and you'll notice. Like it's really like once you're listening for it, it's impressive.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, because I just we talked about, I had not watched this movie in a very long time. I think I joked with you, I probably had watched it on DVD at some point, so it's not quite true. But this is almost the first time I'd watched it where it wasn't full screen. Where I was watching the actual widescreen format, so seeing the full picture as they intended it to be. Because I first saw this on and mostly saw it on VHS and cable. So
different experience to see it as a better quality it is today. So let's we can continue with the plot now. I think I've talked about Marco Beltrami enough. So this next part here. So obviously, once Sydney sees Billy with the cell phone out of his pocket, she's like, that's suspicious, and she basically gets him arrested, convinced that he is the killer right away. And so he's arrested by Deputy Sheriff Dewey Riley, who happens to be Tatum's brother. And so at the crime scene, we also meet investigative journalist Gail Weathers, who tries to get the answers from Tatum, and then she gives her like nothing before driving off. At the police station, Sydney is confronted by Gail, who's writing a book that claims Sid's mother, Maureen, had several affairs, including one with Cotton Weary, and that he was wrongly accused of her murder. And, they kind of have a back and forth, and Gail offers to send her a copy of the book, and Sydney punches her in the face from that comment. So it's just a fun time, but we can talk about that more in a second. But back at Tatum's house, Sydney receives another taunting call from the killer. And so this is like right after she thought that they caught him and that it's Billy. But this is supposed to like prove that the killer isn't Billy. And so because he's in police custody, basically, they release him because they're like, well, the killer just called Sydney and he's been in jail this whole time. And so it's kind of like this back and forth of her just thinking she's safe and then immediately back into feeling unsafe. And then there's also like this part that'll be coming later, but Red Right Hand is another good song that is used a lot in the franchise that they take from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And that kind of like is played a little bit in the background as reports of last night's incident are broadcast on the news. So we're kind of in this weird little place where she's feeling like she's safe and then she's not safe. It's just like chaos and very nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say Red Right Hand is exactly one of the few songs I did specifically notice.
Love it. So good. Yeah. And they use it in future movies too. It's like a recurring.
Yep. Sorry,
the
Rob.
introduction of Gail Weathers, right, played by Courtney Cox, was I think another it's another anchor to this movie. There are so many stars of different levels in this movie, but very key to like what was happening in the 90s. That there was something in here for everybody to kind of relate to.
Well, the stars, like from the studio standpoint, the stars they wanted to cast as kind of like anchors for this were Drew Barrymore. It was Nev Campbell was actually considered a star, because of Party of Five, and then Courtney Cox. Like there was almost no one bigger on the planet at the time, as I'm sure you're gonna tell us.
Well, I mean, we all know that she's from France, and this is a couple years of the show being on, not not this big catalog of I don't know how many seasons it was on, but it was pretty.
It was like 10 or so.
A lot of seasons.
I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years in, and this movie was released. So I mean, beyond Friends, she's very much recognized for this role as well. I mean, she did an outstanding job. It was a lot of fun. Her 2 biggest roles outside of this film was in Masters of the Universe, and then Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, which is another classic,
which had come out like right before Friends hit the air, and so and Ace Ventura was a huge movie. So between Ace Ventura, between Friends, and now she's in this, like she was just massive.
Yeah, on a catapult, right?
Yeah,
big things. And then beyond Friends in the TV world, she was also in Family Ties, Cougar Town, and in the Starz horror comedy series Shining Vale. I don't know that one.
I think it's a relatively new. I haven't seen it, but yeah, it came out in the last couple of years.
Okay.
And her first big break was in a Bruce Springsteen video.
Oh yeah. At the end, right? She's dancing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
With him on stage.
Yeah, man. I love Courtney Cox. I think she's so good as Gail Weathers because it's like the right amount of like, crazed reporter, but like subtly bitchy too. Like she does the mean reporter thing so well.
Yeah. And just a heads up, I may make you guys watch Masters of the Universe one day.
No.
Well, I don't really know what it is, but I'm going to go with Rob and also say no.
What, you don't want to see Dolph Lundgren as He-Man?
No.
That does not sound appealing to me. No, it does not. Just Gail Weathers as a character is just such an interesting one because I mean she does catapult like one of the other conflicts of this plot is did Sydney finger the wrong guy for the crime of her mother's murder?
Well, and there's a lot of good in Gail, and as you pointed out, there's a lot of not so good in Gail, and the script does a good job of putting you in that conflict that Sydney is going through, because you're conflicted about how you feel about Gail the same way Sydney is,
Yeah, and it's like 1 second you're liking Gail, and then she says something, and you're like, "Oh, Gail, you're so sleazy."
Yeah,
no, totally.
Which is exactly that conflict that Sydney is going through.
Right.
Yeah.
And that sleaze comes through as well because she's conniving, right? So she's smart. So I think she starts to recognize that if I start playing up the Deputy Dewey, and get a little flirtatious with him, he'll do some favors, and I'll get the scoops I'm looking for and get some inside play. Deputy Dewey is played by Deputy Dewey Riley is played by David Arquette, who's super well known for this role on screen, but also something I didn't even know, to tell you the truth. I did not know that he was a professional wrestler at one point. I know, Adam, this is very much your world. Something happened to me. I don't know what was going on. I was a young guy, probably going out way too much. I did not know that this was even happening.
Yeah, so what happened is in 2000, he had been in a movie with Scott Conn and Oliver Platt called Ready to Rumble that was based around wrestling, although it was very condescending towards wrestling fans, portrayed them as idiots. But it was done in cooperation with the then World Championship Wrestling company owned by the Turner organization. So they did cross promotion, and they decided as part of this cross promotion to let him win their world title. Spoiler alert, the company was out of business and sold to now WWE, then still WWF, about a year later. And so that tells you how well that went. But it was a very convoluted thing, and in one of his promos, he pretended to be Diamond Dallas Page's friend, and then turned on him, and that's where he says, could never trust. How could you ever trust me? You could never trust somebody from Hollywood,
there you go. It's funny because when you see him in this role, right, and he's also in the Eight-Legged Freaks, he kind of played always someone who was a little wimpy, and I had to Google it when I found this out. I had no idea he was a wrestler. I've seen pictures of him in that wrestling mode, and he looks beefier, right? He looks bigger.
Well, so he did that, and this was just like a one-time thing. He donated all the money he got from that because he didn't want to win the title, because he's a big wrestling fan. He knows how important the title is. He knows what a slap in the face it kind of was.
He's the guy who comes from a big acting family.
Yeah, while it's, I mean, it's kind of like because while wrestling is fake, being the world champion is a recognition of a career. It's also a recognition that you are the guy, the top star of the company. All these things. There are people who struggle and toil their whole lives, sacrificing and never getting it. And so he understood that he shouldn't have won that. And so he donated all the money he earned to the families of Owen Hart and Brian Pillman. Wrestlers who had died prematurely within the past several years before his time as champion. And then in 2017, 2018, he decided to revisit his time in wrestling, get into shape, and take it seriously, actually get trained and have matches. And that's all documented in a really cool documentary called You Cannot Kill David Arquette.
Super interesting. I'm gonna keep it moving because Adam could go on for a whole other podcast.
He could go on about wrestling.
No.
So, but very interesting. Yeah.
That is crazy.
Another early role he had was the movie version of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from before the TV show, which also had Luke Perry and a very young, uncredited Ben Affleck.
Gotcha. He was also in Wild Bill and Never Been Kissed.
Yep.
And I mentioned before Eight-Legged Freaks, which got love. And the TV side, in case of emergency, and he voiced Scully in the Disney Channel animated series Jake and the Neverland Pirates, which I'm familiar with. I don't know if you are.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
But then as we're talking about real life couples.
I was just about to spring it up because we hadn't talked about it yet. About David Arquette and Courtney Cox. People got married on set. They're not married on set, but they found each other through this and got married in 99.
I think the way Courtney describes it is they got married on, they started dating on Scream 1, they got married on Scream 2 and got divorced on Scream 3 or something, Well,
it says they got divorced 2013.
Or so maybe that's Scream 4.
Maybe Scream 4. I think Scream 4. That's closer.
So maybe it's had their child on Scream 3 and then got divorced on Scream 4.
Because I think Scream 4 came out 2011, but it takes a while for a divorce sometimes and all that. But then it's very interesting in Scream 5 that they do kind of have this back and forth, the characters themselves, not the actors, but with Dewey and Gail, because as we can see from this, there was a romance forming between the two of them in this first film.
Yeah, and but I was surprised with how good David's performance was because, especially having not seen it for a long time, the parodies and the criticism of especially his character and the exaggeration of his character really hurt him in his career. They really turned him into far more of a doofus than he actually is.
I love that he's a doofus in this, though. It's so funny.
He plays a great doofus.
Subtle doofus,
Right. But it's more of a realistic doofus.
Yeah, but the other stuff that comes later just takes it to 11, and then especially if you see his character in Ready to Rumble, he's just a raging moron, and that then kind of becomes your perception of not just, you know, Dewey in retrospect, but David Arquette, the person.
Typecasting begins.
Yeah. And so, you know, a couple just quick, like small actor shout outs. Gail's cameraman is played by W. Earl Brown, who plays, who you will know from Deadwood. He's also in Something About Mary, which also has, I believe, the woman who plays Tatum's mom is also in that, coincidentally. And then Cotton Weary, even though you literally just see him in a news clip, he has a bigger part in Scream 2, which I thought that was the only movie. I thought that actor who played him didn't appear until Scream 2. I didn't think you saw Cotton Weary at all. I thought he was just an off-screen character in Scream 1. That's Liev Schreiber, as he was just starting to become a well-known name in this period, and he got $50,000 for that one little appearance.
He also shows up in Scream 3 for a period.
Yeah.
He becomes like a little more involved in the franchise from this, which is I'm not sure if that was the initial plan, but I like that they kind of went with it. But yeah, it is nice to kind of see him this early, and where it leads later on.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean, just like a really, really great cast all around, lots of interesting people. And so kind of getting back into where we are in the plot of this movie. So back at school, Sydney approaches Gail and insists that she identified the right man in her mother's murder, which is who we were just talking about, Cotton Weary, because she says that she saw him leave in the coat that later had her mother's blood. But Gail is not convinced, and she is convinced that it was somebody else and that somebody was seen in that coat, but it was not Cotton Weary. And so also happening around this time, you see two pranksters dress up as Ghostface and run up and down the halls of the school, and they're sent to the principal's office and expelled pretty much right after that. And also at this school day, we also see Sydney run into Billy, who she's still very wary of, despite him being released. And Billy's very upset about this because he's like, I was cleared. I'm like, you still think it's me? That's crazy. And so they kind of have a bit of an argument, a bit of a discussion maybe, where he further upsets her by asking her to basically get over her mom's death, saying that his mom left, but he doesn't let it bother him so much that he can't be intimate. And it's basically he's trying to act like the situations are the same of like a parent leaving versus a parent no longer of this plane of earth. So that further upsets Sydney, and she kind of runs away. And then there is a little scene I didn't really put in here, but there is like another bathroom kind of scary Ghostface type scene that also happens. But the main part of it is basically because of these murders, the school is let out early, and then we get a little needle drop of "School's Out" by Alice Cooper in this part, and I think that really kind of sets the tone. And the whole point of school being out is to have this party coming up that's going to be thrown by Stu Macher because he's celebrating the closure of school. He's going to host this party at his secluded big house. And it's in this section of the film. We also see the principal Himbry, who we'll talk about in a moment. He was also stabbed to death in the office after school was let out. So we meet him, and then he's gone right away.
I kind of laughed at that part, just the way he his death scene was kind of funny to me. The principal Himbry is played by Henry Winkler. The world knows Henry Winkler best for his role as Fonzie, right, on Happy Days, which is, it has been, at this point, I think, exposed all around the world. The films that he's been in include Waterboy, Holes, The French Dispatch, Black Adam, and, of course, Scream. On TV, we know him beyond Happy Days in Arrested Development, Royal Pains, definitely in Parks and Recreation, and as a character named Gene in Barry. He won an Emmy Award for that, and he's won many other awards for his. I mean, he's beyond being, I think, an underrated actor. Maybe that's starting to come, into spotlight now. But I think early, 10, 15 years ago, I think most people that's the Fonz, and that's all you remember.
Yeah, well, especially this period that Scream was made, as he was starting to do Scream, as he was starting to do The Waterboy, that's where he's starting to really shed the typecasting from Happy Days. And he's also just renowned as throughout Hollywood as one of the nicest people in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Well, since we're doing this, since it's Halloween time, I'll tell you that I have met him a number of times, but the first time I met him was in my Stay Puft costume with the kids because we were trick or treating, and that's how I met him.
My God.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we went to his house. I had no idea, and he's full of charm and great. And it's trick or treat time. I've met him a few times after that.
Yeah.
Same guy, really good person.
Yeah, he's got a great memoir that came out recently that my mom read, and she said that was really, really good. That kind of goes over his struggle of kind of being typecasted and having a bit of a career flub in the middle, trying to figure out where he would go from there, and then kind of the up and up of getting TV roles and kind of getting back into the groove of it. Yeah. And I mean, he as Gene Cousineau in Barry, he's incredible. He's so good in that role. And in this one too, even though it's a very brief role, I think he really plays up the mean for an intense principal where he's like doing the you're both expelled, get out.
Well, but it's also like this movie. We talked about again how good the script is. They do such a good job of placing little red herrings for so many different characters. There's a little red herring for Billy. There's a little red herring for Randy. There's a little there are little clues that mean it could be Billy. There are little clues that mean it could be Randy. Little clues it could be Stu. Little clues it could be Principal Himbry. There are clues that it could be Sydney's father. There are on and on. So if you've never seen the movie before, you're never quite sure which person it might be because there's something that says it could be any of them.
Adam, I think it's the combination of that and some of these the star-studded cast that it makes me wonder do you make this good of a film on accident or on purpose? Because purposely, it almost feels like that always implodes. It never works, and yet this came out great.
I think having Wes there, Wes is just I watched his other stuff, man. He is just good. When you give him the talent to work with, when you give him the quality of material to work with, when you let him do his thing, you give him the money, the budget, and let him do his thing. This is what you end up with.
And this is a bit further into his career too. So he's already got Nightmare under his belt. He's kind of got that ability in there. Yeah. And also the fact that he had written New Nightmare, I think, around the same time. So he kind of already had this meta idea in his head. So I think that really helps what brings this and what makes it so impressive. But were you about to talk about cameos? Because I wanted to bring up some fun ones.
I was going to talk about especially the cameo just before Himbry dies. He thinks he hears something. He's alone in his office. He thinks he hears something. He pokes his head out and looks around in the hallway, and he sees this old janitor cleaning the floors. And the old janitor is dressed like Freddy Krueger.
The red and green striped sweater.
Yeah. And, he says, "Oh, keep up the good work, Fred." That is played by Wes Craven. Awesome. Which was a fun little cameo.
Meta upon meta, because of course he did Elm Street, and it's him himself. And another cameo that I thought was really fun is Linda Blair, who played Reagan in The Exorcist. Yeah. She is this obnoxious reporter when Sydney first comes up to the school, because Dewey's like, "Oh yeah, it should be chill at school," and then this woman comes up immediately. It's like, "How does it feel to be almost brutally butchered?"
Yeah. She's supposed to be she's supposed to be similar to Gail, but then Gail starts to show other sides that maybe she's not exactly like that character,
Yeah, and it's so fun to see Linda Blair in this kind of little cameo like that, and it's such an intense part. It's so funny.
Now, Himbry, as good as his death is, and as much as once we get to the reveal, we'll talk about how all the deaths kind of make sense. His death wasn't originally in the script. The executive, whose name we don't like to use, said it was too slow. They'd gone because they basically went from the start to towards the end with no deaths, and they needed one more in there to keep the pace up. So they had Himbry go in, and Williamson actually liked that idea also because it gave a reason for people to leave the party later on,
Right.
to make it more abandoned, more isolated as you get into the, finale. And so, but that all wasn't there in the original. So, that's what killed the Fonz.
Yeah, very cool. Very good addition. I think it was a good move adding that in just to have an extra kill because it is a slasher. Yeah. We need to have some slashing.
Well, and it's also one of those things, there are a lot of times executive notes, as we even talked about with this film from some of these same executives, can be very stupid. And, but there are other times they can actually be really useful.
Yeah, and that's one of those moments. And so, kind of continuing on in the movie here, we have a scene at the video store where Randy works, and Randy and Stu are having a discussion about basically who the killer could be, and they're talking about the tropes, and they're having a very meta talk about horror and how it works, and red herrings, and Randy insists that Sid's dad is a red herring and that Billy's actually the killer, because if you were a killer, would you really stand in the horror section? Those kind of little comments like that. But Billy hears Randy say this, and Billy and Stu kind of gang up on him, and they challenge that Randy could actually be the killer because, of course, the person who knows all the horror knowledge could also use that to kill somebody. And so there's a lot of this back and forth where at this point in the movie you're not really sure who it is because everyone's making good points. It could be anyone. And that's at this point also that the town starts to lock up for the citywide curfew. And this is where we get to hear more than just a little snippet. We get to hear a longer form of Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And I think this part is just so good. It's really adding to the creep factor, the ambiance. I think that Nick Cave has such a good kind of voice for this type of song and to set the tone here. And so next is a conversation that Dewey and the sheriff have where they are kind of discovering that the calls that they were trying to trace were traced back to Sid's dad's phone, Neil. And so they're trying to locate him because they're like, okay, this guy, he must be our guy if the calls are coming from his phone. But so that's a thing that's kind of happening in the background. And also what's happening is people arriving at Stu's party. And while this is kind of setting up, you're seeing the house, you're seeing people pull up in the cars. Youth of America by Birdbrain is playing. And that one I think is really fitting if you look into the lyrics of the songs of the film, which I like to do. So I really love that addition. And we're there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to just keep talking about some of the other bits in this before we discuss. So we also have Dewey and Gail. They're kind of keeping watch on the party in case the killer strikes again. And so it's mostly Gail and the cameraman, and Dewey is also there, and they kind of team up and talk because, as we know, romance. And so the party's kind of going on, and one of the big points that kind of propels the plot forward again is Tatum going to go get drinks in the garage. She's isolated, and she sees somebody in a Ghostface costume, and she thinks it's one of her friends. She thinks they're goofing off. But then, of course, an attack ensues, and she ends up getting killed by getting crushed in the garage door. Very, very intense kill. And so not long after, Billy also arrives at the party to reconcile with Sydney. And this is when they finally have sex because Sydney had a conversation with Tatum earlier before the party saying she does want to get past her insecurity. She does want to trust him again, but she just has to try. And so she does end up deciding to have sex with him. But meanwhile, downstairs, the film Halloween is playing on the TV, and Randy Meeks details the rules that are essential for surviving a horror film, which include not having sex, not drinking or taking drugs, and never saying, "I'll be right back," because you won't be back. So much happens in this whole section, but so much to unpack.
And then Stu immediately says, "I'll be right back."
And they'll go, "Oh, yeah, I love it. It's so good." Yeah. And just the fact that they are talking about the different Jamie Lee Curtis as an actress in this. They're talking about her as the Scream Queen and how at this point she's been in a couple of horror films and she's been really cementing herself as the Scream Queen. I love it.
It was fun to watch. This sounds funny. It was fun to watch Tatum die, but it was kind of fun. But
that was the goofiest kill.
Do you think that's believable? It was
not as believable as the others. I will say that one is a little bit more out there.
It's out there for a couple reasons. One, she is so tiny, the actress herself, that she actually could not get stuck in a doggy door, so they had to kind of like nail her, like her clothing in to because she kept sliding out. And then just like I know from experience with some of those motors, like that motor doesn't have enough, like maybe, okay, again, trying to, put
Add logic when it's not in, overthinking
not
it.
just that, but also trying to give, benefit of the doubt. This is the 90s. Things were a little different back then. Garage doors were a little heavier, especially on older garage doors that had been installed, pre-90s even. And so the motors had to be even a little beefier. But adding an extra 100+ pound of human, the motor is going to break in shear and
you're going to break the door. It's not going to break
But
you.
you know what? It is a brutal kill. It is effective. Because you're just like, what the heck? How could that happen? It's funny. So I was trying to figure out where we wanted to talk about Tatum, and I was trying to think of a part where she shines, and unfortunately a part she shines is right before she dies. So I did not want to be like, now that we've seen her killed, let's talk about her. So I did put her up earlier in this because it felt so wrong to put her in this. I think that works,
but I thought she shined very well throughout the movie, and it's one of those things, setting aside, like I can remember, like I said, having a crush on her and the character, when I watched it the first time, as a 13-year-old. You are disappointed. There's a lot of you that wishes she could have, not died and, kept going in the franchise, because she is such a good character and has such a great relationship with Sydney. So,
but it's a slasher and people gotta die.
Oh yeah.
So unfortunate, but happens like that. That's the struggle is like, I think that's why like a lot of modern slashers have started to like, they don't quite get that you have to make the people care about the people being slashed, and they don't take the moment to make you care about the people who are going to be killed, because they're like, they're going to be killed anyway, so why bother? But I think it's really important to have that kind of connection, so you actually care about the people who are getting killed, and you're not just kill them off.
It also adds suspense, so that way you can do the fake scares, because you never know which one of them might get killed off, and that's why, again, that's why you have the Drew Barrymore character get killed off in the beginning, because like if she can, then any character you meet and get to like, no matter the level of the actor or actress or whatever, will everybody's at risk. So anytime they're just trying to ramp up the tension, and that to me, some people criticize the movie when it's in between kills, but I think it's just as good and like if you turn this from a slasher more into just a mystery with all the teen relationships and everything and the dialogue, I think it would work. It would work as a movie. It wouldn't work just as well as a horror slasher movie, but it would still be a great movie that they could, just because, again, Kevin Williamson did a great job with every level of the script.
I think in 2024 released almost as a miniseries because of that. What you're talking about, the in-between kills still works really well as sort of a fun drama.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of given spoilers that there are future Scream movies, but we'll talk more about the Scream franchise, in the aftermath, and see what we get there. So
and while you were saying about Kevin Williamson's script, and actually it calls back to something we talked about in part 1 about the PG-13 thing. There is a part in the movie, they're watching Halloween downstairs, and Billy and Sid are having sex upstairs, and they go, time for the obligatory tit shot, and then it shows, but you don't see Sydney's boobs at all. It cuts away, like it shows from behind once more.
And I think that probably gets back into that fight with the ratings system, especially being Wes Craven, that they were already having a hard enough that the gore and other elements were more intrinsic to the plot and the needed tension of the atmosphere, and some of it couldn't be reshot, whereas they could cut around any nudity that they may have planned, but they also may not have planned to actually have.
I like to think of it as like them against expectations. Doing a fake out on purpose. So the obligatory tit shot, and then you don't actually see the tit shot because they're like, we're not doing that. I like that.
And some of that probably does get into, different perspectives, that a straight male author, writer probably would have included it because oh yeah, man, that was, one of the parts of the movie I always loved, and so we got to have that, whereas, Kevin Williamson, being a gay man, is like, yeah, no, I don't care about that.
And also, it's because it subverts expectations. I always thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into the thick of it, guys. We're getting into the third act where things start to get revealed.
Now, especially having Randy establish the rules as that is going on is meant to, again, talking about the greatness of the script, it's meant you to really worry about Sydney because she has just violated one of those rules. You saw what happened to Tatum when she violated one of the rules. She said, I'll be right back, with the beers, and she died. So, what is going to happen to Sydney? Her plot armor is gone.
Right, exactly. And we were mentioning Himbry before. We kind of revealed this a little early, but it's not a big deal, about how the party goers do get a call that Himbry was murdered, the principal. And this is also meant to, I'm sure, be a commentary on the times and the desensitization of this kind of thing, because when they hear this news, they are excited and they want to go see his hanging body up in the schoolyard and leave the party.
But again, I think that's also meant to be realistic because, that especially in 90s movie terms, with the principal everybody hates, it's not going to be like, oh my God, that's so sad. The characters, the dude bro characters from that time are going to be like, oh, that's awesome. I
don't know, man. That's just like, I would not, at that age, I'm not interested in seeing a dead body, but that's also kind of going into I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's like, oh, I hate this principal, I can't wait to see him gutted and hang from somewhere. That seems a little morbid, if that's how you felt at 15, I'm a little nervous for you.
No, I never, but I'm also going to say there was a strain of that running through. I never liked I've never watched even those videos, the online death videos and all that crap, but at this point in time, even before the online stuff, there was faces of death videos and that kind of crap, was really big with the edgy Gen X set. And so, again, this may be a bit of an exaggeration, but I can see how it's meant to also reflect a bit of reality where they would, because again, it's supposed to be saying what the previous generation would tell us isn't true of the kids being sad when, the main principal dies. This is how it would actually be, even if it's, the exaggerated version. So I think that's kind of what it is.
See, this to me, how it feels and looking through a modern lens is like about today's kids filming dead bodies, even though they're not supposed to. This is like that. Somebody dies and they're like, oh, let's go check it out. So cool. Because of just the eventual desensitization. The nihilism. Exactly. And so we're kind of getting off track here, but basically all of it to say, no, it's good. It's very important to kind of talk about this kind of stuff. But so because of this, a bunch of people leave the party and they're driving in a car and they nearly run over Dewey and Gail as who are walking in the road, which actually inadvertently leads them to Neil's hidden car. So they're kind of putting some pieces together. So that's happening. And then also Sid and Billy, they're having a conversation post-coital, and they are, and then Sydney kind of discusses how clever it would be if Billy's one phone call actually threw her off his scent. She's like, oh, who was your one phone call? Just curious, that kind of thing. Because even after all this, she's still a little bit on guard. And as that happens, as she's still kind of unsure about him, Billy is then stabbed by Ghostface. And so right there, you're like thinking like, okay, he's looking suspicious. And then bam, he's stabbed. And you're like, oh my God, it's not him. Who is it then? And so there's like a lot of action in this bit. So kind of bear with me here, folks. So Sydney evades Ghostface by climbing out the attic window. She falls onto the family boat to the ground. She sees Tatum's dead body. Meanwhile, Ghostface is kind of coming for Randy. He's watching Halloween alone in the living room, and he's drunk. But Ghostface hears Sydney scream after seeing Tatum dead, and he follows her outside, and then comes and then kills. Actually, I think I might be saying some of this out of order, but we'll pause for a second. I'll come back to that because I think I'm getting some of the events out of order. But basically, coming for Randy, not the big scene coming up, what I'm thinking of, but the cameraman, Kenny, does die in that moment, and Gail is trying to escape because she's realizing that shit is not safe. She crashes, she's knocked unconscious, and then Dewey also is kind of incapacitated. He gets stabbed by Ghostface at some point in this kind of scuffle of this back and forth between houses. We also have this part where Sydney is in the police car trying to hide from Ghostface, and she's locking the door, and they're unlocking the door, and she's able to finally get out of the car and run towards the house. And as she's getting close to the house, Randy is approaching her and being like, oh, like, you need to help me, like, it's Stu, he's coming for me, blah, blah, blah. And the two of them, and Stu's coming out of the woodwork, and he's going, it's Randy, man. And they're back and forth, going back and forth, trying to accuse each other. And she basically is like, fuck you both, and then locks the door. Yeah. And is trying to just get away from the killer. She can't trust anybody. She can only trust herself.
And at this point, because I realize it's hard to describe exactly what's going on because there's so much going on and some of it's simultaneous. Yeah. So like when Randy, part of the gimmick when you're seeing the killer behind Randy is the cameraman, when Gail had ulterior motives when she was getting into the house with Dewey, that she set up a little hidden camera,
way in the beginning.
At the beginning of the party. And this is a 90, that's not only newfangled technology, but also that camera would have been so much bigger than like if you had a hidden camera these days. And also there was a lot more latency or delay in the feed. So when they're watching on the monitor, it's several seconds after what's happened in real life. So
this is too
it's so good because so it's like Randy is watching Halloween and he's seeing Jamie he's seeing Jamie Lee Curtis, but actually the character herself.
Yeah,
anyway.
Well, and again, you get into the meta of Jamie, look behind you, Jamie behind you.
Yeah, and his name is Jamie Kennedy.
Yeah,
exactly. So because he's really drunk and he's going like, behind you, oh my God, look behind you. And then you got like Kenny and Sydney in the van going, behind you, look out. And it's so good. Yeah. I love it.
And again, with good scripting, they'd established the latency there earlier when Gail initially put the camera in, and then startles Kenny because she's there when they still see her on the camera, and it's like, crap, not a big deal, doesn't really matter, some latency. But then in the heat of the moment, they forget it. So as Kenny opens the door, because Sydney had gone to hide with him, then he opens the door, gets his throat slit, and then the rest of the chase happens. Yeah, and then I think at one point, Sydney, like just before she locks Stu and Randy out, she had gotten Dewey's gun off of him.
Yeah, she does. She does have the gun when she is like between the two of them, and they're trying to, because there is the bit where Stu is like, "Come on, give me the gun," like like trying to get it off of her, and that's they're both trying to explain that they are the good guy and the other is the bad guy.
Come on, Sid, he's a maniac. Come on, there's just that scene chewing that Lillard is doing.
Yeah, man, Matthew Lillard, he's so good, and he's just like so dramatic. I love it. Yeah. Oh man. So we're finally almost to the reveal now. So she's inside and she's like, okay, I'm safe from the killer. And so then she's like closes the door, and then it's one of those Marco Beltrami score moments where it's like a dong, and you see Billy, he's wounded and he's falling down the stairs basically. And she's like, oh my God, Billy, like I didn't know you were still alive. She's freaking out. And then he, somehow, I don't remember if it's Sydney that lets him back inside or Billy, but basically Randy is let inside, I think by Billy. And
it's by Billy.
Yeah. And so it's this moment where Randy comes inside and he's like, oh, like, a killer, like we got, like he's gone mad or whatever. Something basically he's freaking out. And then it's this moment, this reveal. It's the big moment where Billy says that we all go a little mad sometimes. And then he shoots Randy in the shoulder. And so this is the big reveal. This is him. He is the killer. He's been the killer all along. He's left the breadcrumbs, and then it's revealed that Stu is his accomplice, and he has a voice-changing device that reveals that they have been using and talking this whole time. Is that what you were going to say, Adam?
Well, no. That they were both the killers. That it's not even really
they're both
an
the killer.
accomplice.
Well, it is an accomplice. They're helping each other, but it's Billy's thing that he wants to do.
He's the master plan.
Billy is the mastermind. He's the one who wants the revenge. Stu's just doing it because peer pressure. He's too sensitive.
Yeah,
Stu shines here. Keep on going.
He does.
Yeah.
This is classic. Like Stu's great here.
Yeah. And so this is where we learn the reason why it's happening, because Billy says that they killed Sid's mother because he discovered that there was an affair with Billy's father and Sid's mother, and that she, like the mom, was responsible for his own mother leaving because she found out about the affair. And so he's basically like, oh, this bitch imploded my family life. This is terrible. We have to kill her, which is unhinged behavior, but as we know, this man is not well. And so the pair also kind of revealed that they abducted Neil to frame him for all of the crimes, which is why the phone had Neil's, like it was going to Neil's phone, because they had planned all of this to basically frame Sid's father. And they had this whole backstory of basically being like, oh, like he was never the same after his wife was, that kind of like. And so then they're also part of their master plan is that they will be seen as the victims. And that, like, the dad kills Sydney, and then they are just the lone survivors. Yeah, they're staging the whole thing. They're trying to be the lone survivors. So they start to, like, leave each other stab wounds and stuff and help each other do that. And it's through one of those times that they're stabbed a little too deep. And I'm sure Adam's got
they're asking each other. They're talking. Like, okay, stab me here. Remember to do it to the side and not too deep. And then
instantly,
it's hilarious.
And instantly screws it up. And there's like a fun fact we'll talk about with some of that stabbing, unless Adam already has it. But it's kind of like this, the implement of the plans. They're getting stabbed too much. They're fighting over the knife and everything. And then Gail is able to return and kind of like be like, all right, whatever's going on here, I'm stopping it. I've got the gun now, because it makes like they make you believe that she died, but she actually woke up, finds the gun, saves the day, as she says. Here, why don't we pause here, because there are a couple things I do want to talk about before we talk about the rest here. So actually, the thing I wanted to talk about, the fun, not so fun fact, is that one part when they did the stabbing through Skeet Ulrich for Billy, like they actually did stab a part where like he already had like a wound as a kid or something.
That actually comes later. So that comes when Sydney's coming out of the closet.
Oh, that's when it happens, not from Stu.
Correct.
But yeah, to hear that, man, it's like, to actually like have an injury actually happen from a fake thing.
They had a plate. We'll cover it more when we get to the actual thing, but it's a little bit later than this. That there was some improvising going on in this scene, or around this scene, because again, like things get a little muddy on where exactly stuff is, because
if we did a play-by-play of everything, we'd be here for 3 hours going over every single part.
So like some of the stuff, like after Sydney has run off again, and she's on the phone with Stu, explaining like, hey, I've called the cops. That my mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me line is improvised. And
same with the other one where like Billy hits him with the phone. He goes, "You hit me with the phone, dick." Also, not playing.
There are two different explanations for how that was improvised. One is like three, I guess. One is like it was just the sticky blood caught on the phone as Skeet tried to toss it to him. and it hit him. And, he just rolled with it and improvised, and they liked it. The other is Wes actually told Skeet to hit him with the phone to see what he would do. And then, like kind of the third in between that is Skeet decided to do it as a bit of a joke. And so, it's one of those, it's a little hard to tell now because there's some competing stories told by the same people over the years what exactly is true, but it seems to be agreed even by Williamson that that was not a line he had written, and that and it's one of those iconic lines. I mean, like,
it's so iconic.
I had not watched the movie in like 20 years or so, and my mom and dad are going to be so mad at me, and you hit me with a phone, were some of the lines I remembered to this day. I
think he also said the other thing he said was really funny was something to the effect of, this is after being purposely wounded a few times a little too harshly. He's like, I think I'm feeling woozy.
Yeah. I'm feeling a little woozy, man.
I think I'm dying.
I mean, like, again, like, you're probably getting tired of it, but I just love Matthew Lillard's performance throughout this whole thing. Like, every line, like, everything about it was so good. And we talked earlier about the voice of Scream, but, Ghostface, Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Roger L. Jackson. But I was actually a little surprised that it wasn't actually an amalgamation of both actors, because we were trying to dance around it when we talked about it earlier, but he really does have nuances of both actors in the voice of both Matthew and Skeet. And so I was surprised it was then a completely different person doing it, because he did a great job of taking like little ticks and things that you might associate with either actor and incorporating that into his performance. Whether that was deliberate or not, I have no idea. And maybe that's projection after the fact, but that was my thought watching it. So.
Yeah, I would say I feel like it might be a coincidence if so, because the other films, it doesn't really feel that way. It doesn't feel like Ghostface is trying to portray the actual people in any way. It's just the Ghostface voice. But I think it's just a happy coincidence that it manages to sound like Skeet Ulrich a lot, especially in the opening scene. Like, every time I watch it, it sounds like Billy. It sounds like him.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there are also some ticks there that kind of remind me of Stu as well. And so that's of Matthew, and so that's where it was, like I said, it felt like an amalgamation of both, which is perfect, because that's what the killer's voice is in reality. It's both of them at different times doing the voice.
There are a lot of videos out there, like, going over like which Ghostface killed which person and everything, where they basically, from context clues, blah blah blah. And so it's always interesting to watch those and figure that out. But that's something for another time.
Well, but I mean, like, the reasoning, like, there's actually like, when you put the whole Leopold and Loeb aspect into it, that's that's part of their motivation. Billy has his motivation, and then you look at the people targeted. Casey is someone who had rejected Stu. The asshole principal, and then Stu's current girlfriend, because he was getting tired of her. That there's this through line of misogyny, of male,
no, Adam, what
privilege.
Are you trying to say? Privilege. Huh? Okay, there you go. I was trying to figure out where you were headed with it.
And you also see that even in some of like Billy's stuff before this. Like, we didn't really touch on it enough because I think we got kind of off on other stuff. But there was that scene with when Billy's just at the prison. You're starting to feel sympathetic towards him again, and then he's has that scene with Sydney at the school, and it's like, come on, it's been a year. It's only been a year since her
Yeah.
mother was brutally murdered, and you're telling her to get over it all and put out already.
It's major incel energy for sure.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I mean, it's like interesting, like how forward it is in, the male privilege, in male entitlement, thinking, that these guys would be great male rights activists and that kind of red pill crap.
Mourning your mother was so last season.
Yeah,
Be over that.
Like you should get. I mean, but I was talking about how even Tatum at one point says something about how she should be over it by now, and I'm like, what are you even?
Yeah,
it's been a year. Like, come on, it was a very traumatic. But when you're a teenager, you're not thinking about those things. So I think back to some of the stuff that now I know that my friends dealt with when we were teenagers, and I was not at the mental capacity to help them the way I could have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
you don't. Yeah.
It's also. Again, showing, the, very dark side of, and some of this was, again, just in the culture in the 90s, that Billy, all he wants, out of the relationship with Sydney is to have sex with her, and again, once, that's done, she can be disposed of. And he mainly only wants to have sex with her as revenge because her mother had ruined his parents' marriage.
He wants to have that big gotcha moment.
Yeah,
exactly. And so I guess let's get back into the last little bit here, and then we can talk about that a little bit more. So basically, we'll just skip ahead to the fact that there's some back and forth where Gail has the gun, and then she's incapacitated. Billy has the gun. But then, like, Sydney is able to do that whole phone call bit that we were talking about. She's running away. She's doing the phone call. And she's able to hide away in the closet and incapacitate Billy in the Ghostface costume.
She puts on the Ghostface costume. She jumps out, and she has, like, an umbrella that's like a knife umbrella or something, and stabs Billy in the heart. And that's where Skeet was legitimately almost injured, that they'd had a protection plate and they had a female stunt woman in the costume, but obviously it's hard to see out of the Ghostface costume. And so she missed her mark on his chest and hit his heart surgery scar from when he was a child.
That's rough, but what you do for acting, I guess. So that happens, and she's also able to, like, fight off and kill Stu by dropping a TV on his head, and so she's able to kind of.
It's a 90s TV that's kind of realistic.
Yeah, I guess for anyone who has not seen this movie and is curious, it's one of those big guys with the big thing in the back. So naturally would kill you. So then it's one of those things where it's like, she's like, okay, I've killed them both. But then, of course, Billy gets up again because the killer, they get up again. They never can quite be killed easily the first time, and he's attempting to stab Sydney for the final kill, but then Gail shoots him. And so now you think, okay, it's over. And Randy and Gail and Sydney, they're looking down at Billy's body. And then Randy remarks that horror film killers often revive for one final scare. And that's when Billy sits back up and Sydney shoots him right in the head right away, and this time kills him for good. And then Sydney says the now iconic line, "Not in my movie." And so they are recovering after this. This is the final wrap up. Morning comes. Neil also, we didn't mention, he was also in the closet for this framing thing. They had kidnapped the father before he could even go to his conference. So he was kept all this time. And so, he's rescued. Dewey's taken away by ambulance. Even though he got stabbed, he did survive. And then Gail has this impromptu news report that she discloses about the night's events. And that's when the credits roll and we hear Whisper to a Scream. That is by the artist Soho. Perfect end song.
Yeah. Well, and again, like talking about and wrapping up little character arcs, because a lot of the characters that survive had their own like little character arcs, like Dewey, kind of became more of hero and an adult, and Gail here, this is seeing her like achieve what she wanted of being more of a serious news person with breaking this story,
but having to go through hell to get there.
Right. So
And probably having to operate like the way she thought she was supposed to operate, not realizing. Do you know what I mean? Like there was a immature way of doing her job, and after all this,
trying to take shortcuts.
Yeah, yes. And it's hard to disconnect because now she has the firsthand experience. So it also gives her an idea of reporting in a way that humanizes the people that she's reporting on finally, because she's been in their shoes.
Yeah. Right. She moved up after the end of this. She moved up.
Yeah. No, but it just great job all around. Originally, Randy and Dewey were not supposed to survive. That they actually filmed. They kind of did retakes, some reshoots I can't remember if they did reshoots or if they filmed these alternates with the suspicion, and then test audiences were like, no, we actually kind of like them. Can you please let them survive?
Do you have any idea of what the circumstance was of Dewey's death? Like how?
I mean, basically, like you see him, like
he gets
stabbed here, and here they just say it's non-fatal.
Okay.
So a bit of a tangent story. In the Transformers, the movie from the 80s, it's very famous for Optimus Prime dying. Spoilers for a movie from 1986 for kids. But like kids freaked out in the theaters. They're crying, they're bawling because they just saw their hero die on the big screen, even though like to the writers, that was just refreshing the toy line. And before that, like they killed off all the, original Transformers so they could be the kids could be introduced to who were going to be the new toys. So, it had already been a very traumatic movie up until that point. And they got the idea to kill off Prime. G.I. Joe, the movie, was in production at the same time, but it was going to come into theaters later. And in that, they were going to kill off their kind of leader figure, similar to Optimus Prime, Duke. Then, based on the reaction everyone had to that, they ended up, Hasbro and the production company scrambled and changed Duke dying. So it's very obvious, like when you watch the G.I. Joe, the movie back now, that Duke is supposed to be dead. And then they just kind of like come in, he's in a coma. And then, at the end of the movie, like everybody's celebrating and like just off screen, and Duke's going to be okay.
I mean, that's why we need test screenings, folks. We need test screenings so that you don't tank a franchise. And that's what happens with this, I think, because like Dewey and Randy were kind of fan favorites. And so it works because they do play a bigger role in some of the other future films. I won't say who for how long, but they do make other appearances. And so one line that I really wanted to touch on before we get to production wrap-up stuff is that there is this moment where Billy says, movies don't create psychos, movies make psychos more creative. And actually, that is a line that helped Kevin Williamson develop much of the script in the first place, is that idea, that whole theme of basically movies don't create psychos and that it's not necessarily the media that is making kids more violent. And that is it's just really interesting that he was able to kind of put it in there and kind of add to the whole thing, because Billy's psychotic anyway. But he might have been spitting a little bit there.
Yeah. No, as you get older, you see this go in a cycle of, first it's movies, then it's, and music, then it's video games. And, there's always a boogeyman excuse for it, and it's especially funny because actually by that point in the mid-90s, while big sensational acts like school shootings would only rise after this, violence as a whole would kind of peaked in the early 90s and then has fallen to historic lows since then. We've had like a bit of an uptick in the around 2020 or so, and it's started to go back down from that brief uptick. But and a lot of people think that might have something to do with removing lead from gasoline, that we might have all been, and other products, that we might have all been lead poisoned, which led to aggression. But that's a whole other thing. But it's
great commentary for the time and everything, and the impressions on society, for sure.
Yeah, because this was a much bigger, like especially compared to today, it was a much bigger debate going on at the time. And
so yeah, what are the everyone's closing thoughts? What do we overall think of the movie? I can go first because this is like a 5 out of 5 movie for me.
Yeah.
I love it. One of my favorite slashers franchises ever. It's just like such a classic, just beloved, and it's one of those things where it's like so quotable. There's so much commentary. There's so much to talk about. Obviously, we've been here discussing for longer than usual because there's a lot to say.
Yeah, Rob,
quintessential popcorn movie night, fun slasher film. I wasn't even that excited to first rewatch this, and then when I did, I was like really happy I was, because it's I forgot how good of a movie this that Scream was, and really what a masterpiece it really is, as far as like from beginning to the end on so many levels that we've already discussed. So I give it, for me, because this is not really my genre, even though I love, it's a great film. So for me, I'm going to say it's a 8 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10. That's the knock is only because it's not my thing, really.
Yeah. No, totally. I get it. That to me, it is, not just a good slasher film. It is just a great all-around film that it works on so many levels. You've heard me talk about the cast is so amazing. The editing, the direction, the cinematography, just the production design, just everything is working and clicking. The script is amazing. That I cannot speak highly enough about it. I don't really do star ratings. I just say I like this thing or I didn't. But I highly recommend this movie and think it is worthy of being, an all-time classic, and not just one that I recognize as an all-time classic, but one that I actually legitimately enjoy, and will probably try and watch through some of the other Screams going forward. So
definitely worth it.
Yeah. So that was the movie and our thoughts. But what did the world of 1996 think? It received generally positive reviews at the time, with a Rotten Tomatoes score aggregating to contemporaneous reviews of 81% and a Metacritic score, again, using reviews from the time, of 66 out of 100. There was praise for the wit, the commentary on the genre, and the cast, while others disliked the violence and gore, and some felt what wit and cleverness that was there was thin and repetitive. At the box office, it opened on over 1,400 screens across the country and Canada and brought in $6.4 million in its opening weekend. Good enough for fourth, behind 101 Dalmatians, the live-action version with Glenn Close, Jerry Maguire, and opening at number 1, also in its debut weekend, which is a bit of a redundant sentence, Beavis and Butthead Do America. That this was considered disappointing, and many felt it was DOA and destined to underperform, as so many of Craven's other films and many big horror films had at the time. And if it had been 2024, that would have been the end of the story, as opening weekend is almost everything. But in 1996, films could still grow based on word of mouth. In its second week, while it fell to fifth overall, its overall total rose to 9.1 million. And the next week, it reached number 3 with 10 million. Scream would remain in the top 10 for 9 weeks, bringing in just over $100 million in the U.S. and Canada, plus an additional $70 million abroad, for a total of $173 million at the box office. It was released on home video in June of 1997 and became the second most rented movie of the year.
I do have to say that even though, like, in 2024, people consider stuff failures if it doesn't do good in the opening weekend, I do think there are still films that do get those moments that build from word of mouth. I think one example that I can think of in the horror community specifically is Terrifier 2. That one I remember there was at only a couple of theaters, and then by word of mouth, people were hearing how gory it was, how bloody it was, and then it got more people interested, and they expanded to many other theaters and was in for a good amount of time in the theater and made millions back on a very, very small budget because I think his name is Damien Leone or something like that, director, but he does stuff on very low budget things, and he made like quadruple back on what he made. So it does still happen, but it's definitely a little more rare. But I do think that it's still capable of happening in 2024.
Yeah, part of the challenge is in 2024, your window to home release is much smaller. Here, it was 6 to 12 months was a typical window to home before it would hit home release, and then even longer before it would hit like cable. Whereas, now, that window is more like 3 months, sometimes even less. Before it's hitting streaming services and digital storefronts and DVD, and then going from there. So it's
this era that we're in, Adam. I can't stand the era where if a movie in the first 24 hours doesn't do X amount, it's got all these titles of failure on it.
It happened with Fall Guy and Furiosa, movies I really enjoyed, which was sad. But it's like we're looking at the Thursday night returns from the secret sneak previews, and it's already dead. It's like, wait, what?
Jeez. And then they just run with that story, and it becomes prophecy.
I understand it happens, but it's a little more rare. It's the same. You don't get those same, like those mid-level movies that become the sleeper hit of the summer, or stuff like that. The film became nothing short of a phenomenon. Scream was everywhere. The success led to 6 total movies so far, with a 7th currently in development. The first sequel, simply called Scream 2, was released almost exactly 12 months after the first, which grossed an almost identical amount as the first, like within 0.6 million or so. It also sparked a revival of slasher films, with movies like Urban Legend also seeing success. It also spawned parodies, most famously the Scary Movie franchise, which not only used Scream's original name, as we talked about in part 1, but was also distributed by Dimension Films, the same as Scream. But the connection between the two goes further, as the film was directed by Keenan Ivory Wayans and had been co-written by his brothers Marlon and Sean. Keenan Ivory was the man behind In Living Color, the show that gave Scream screenwriter Kevin Williamson one of his few acting credits. Scary Movie would not only go on to spark many sequels of its own, but actually made far more than the movie it was parodying at the box office, with over $278 million worldwide.
Yeah, everyone loves a good goof. I remember those were big. They were big. They were really. They came out with a whole bunch of them at the 2000s that I remember that were very insane. Actually, it might have been the reason why I started watching more horror movies to begin with, because I was curious about the things they were parodying before. I was a little young to see them still.
And it spawned a lot of other, and like this genre wasn't new. You'd had like Airplane and The Naked Gun and some of those parody style movies before, but, and even Mel Brooks before that. But here, Scary Movie at first wasn't just parodying, like a later, not only the Scary Movie franchise, but especially a lot of like the Not Another Teen Movie and Not Another Superhero Movie and all that kind of stuff. Like it didn't. Like they stopped even really having jokes or commentary on the movies or genres and their tropes and expectations, and just started having references, like, hey, remember this thing? And sometimes it's not even a thing from the movie or genre. It's like, hey, remember this random thing from the internet?
They got really raunchy with it, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, the Scary Movie was pretty raunchy in the first place.
Yeah.
That was like one of the points of the whole movie, and it had its own fight with the MPAA board. But that it and we already, Rob and I kind of already talked about in part 1 just how you could not escape Scream in 1997, and just the movie itself. That was one thing I didn't think we talked about. Just the fashion and the sound of it is just about the most 90s thing I'd seen in so long. Like it was like if the 90s, had a baby, it would be that movie. It was like, oh my God, this is like stereotypical 90s. So
it is. But I'm happy that Scream introduced or modernized, the slasher films, because I'm really happy that we're away from the old formula of all these stereotypes that we already talked about. The boob shots and all that stuff. Like, it was so predictable. So now we've modernized it with this. So
yeah. Well, and screenwriter Kevin Williamson would see his career skyrocket based on the success of Scream. And many of those successful slasher films, Rob, that you were talking about that came out of this period were written by Williamson, including I Know What You Did Last Summer and The Faculty. It also led to his first script, Killing Mrs. Tingle, now retitled Teaching Mrs. Tingle, to finally get produced. Although it didn't do well at the box office, it did, however, star one of the actors from the hit teen drama Dawson's Creek, Katie Holmes. Dawson's Creek was another of Williamson's projects as well, one that people tend to forget because it's not a horror slasher film. In the late 90s, Williamson was on top of the world, and while outside of continuing to work on the Scream franchise, his career has cooled, he found a level of success he never could have imagined that night house sitting in 1994. Wes Craven would go on to direct the first 4 Scream movies, all written by Williamson. He would also direct the thriller Red Eye, also written by Williamson, and finally get his chance to break out of the horror slasher genre with Music of the Heart in 1999, a biographical drama starring Meryl Streep, set in high school based around music. Scream cemented his legacy as a legendary director and visionary, and his reputation would only grow after his death from a brain tumor in 2015 at the age of 76. Today, Scream is seen as a classic. Ghostface has become as iconic as Jason, Freddy Krueger, or Michael Myers. Do we have any final thoughts on the film and its legacy?
I think we covered a lot of it, but yeah, Wes Craven, I just like the perfect team of Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, Marco Beltrami, like all of them came together and is what made this film what it is. Like the behind the scenes, the actors, every aspect of it. I think if you had taken away one element, it maybe wouldn't have been quite the same or felt the same. I think that this amalgamation together is what makes it so like perfect, is every element of it.
I can't say this enough, how well done it was, and how clearly talented Kevin Williamson was, because, his work on I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, great movies.
Love them.
His work, Dawson's Creek was, well, I never watched it, was never my thing, was a huge, phenomenal hit. With not just Katie Holmes, but James Vanderbeek and Joshua Jackson all came out of that show. I mean, even the theme song for that show, a song by Paula Cole, was a huge radio hit. It was so successful and helped launch the WB network, now CW. And so Kevin Williamson really was just everywhere. And so, just awesome. Rob?
No, I think I've said enough, man. I recommend it. Way better than Cats.
Never seen it unless one of you two make me for the show.
Maybe that'll be our revenge for the apple.
Well, that'll be your revenge because I do have Masters of the Universe on Blu-ray here at my house.
Oh, no.
So.
Can we have a veto?
And that was the movie and our thoughts, but we'd love to hear what you think. Tell us your thoughts, what we got right, what we got totally wrong, and everything in between. You could do that in the comments or on social media. We are at Savage Movie Nights Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Remember, there's the S after Nights on Instagram and Facebook, but not anywhere else. Give us a follow to stay up to date and drop in the comments, your thoughts and feelings. Now that we've learned the rules, talked about scary movies, and defeated Ghostface, it's time to look at what's next. And next, we head into the jungle. We go a little crazy and take a giant real-life steamship over an actual mountain because we're talking about Fitzcarraldo, the classic and infamous Werner Herzog movie. You can find Fitzcarraldo to stream on Amazon Prime, Peacock, Tubi, and many more. You can also rent it or buy it digitally on Apple, Amazon, or Google. Or if you want to watch it on physical media, you can get it on DVD and Blu-ray. But however you get it, watch it and come back here next month as we talk all about it. Thanks so much to my co-host Rob and Kristen. Thanks so much to our editor Javi and the entire Savage Content team. Thanks so much to our sponsor, Jazzology with Willard Jenkins. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for listening. Please give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like, ring the bell, leave a comment, all the good YouTube things. I've been your host, Adam, and we'll see you next time on the Savage Movie Night Podcast.